Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is remove this air box. It's got 4 Phillips head bolts holding it in. We'll take this off and they'll be able to access the triple bank carburettors behind. It appears that there are 2 different types, larger ones on the bottom, smaller ones on the top. Now we can see the 3 carbs. And with this engine, the bottom one isn't delivering fuel to the engine. So we're going to take it off and we'll go through how to clean it. Now that that front plate's off, the airbox, we need to remove the linkages for the bottom carburetor. The first one is the choke, which when pulled sets the choke, pushed in, removes the choke, and that's just held on with a little clip that's depressed and the rod can be pulled out. The second one is just behind there, get a screwdriver, is this one, and this one is attached through a rod all the way to the throttle linkage. When the throttle is put on, the rod on the right hand side is connected to the oil pump, which allows for more oil to be delivered to the engine, because this is an auto lube engine. There's the oil tank there, and these are the oil lines coming up here and on top. Now on this side we've just got the throttle linkage that needs to be removed. So these links have now been removed. It easy is just popping them off. Use the back of a screwdriver and I just go between and just pop them off. I'll pop the second one as well just to give a bit more play. And now it's just this plate that's holding it on. Should be able to get it off. So what I've done is 10mm socket, these 2 lower ones, they're fully loose now, so that in theory the carb isn't attached. You can see it wobbling there. I have slackened the upper 2 just so that it gets a bit of play on this plate. And there is a fuel line. I think I said it was an oil line before, but it's actually the fuel inlet for the carb on that side that needs to come off, but that's just a push fin. There may or may not be an oil line, because there is oil lines from the oil lube. I don't know whether that's on the carb or on the intake manifold, but we'll see when we pull it off. So what I've had to do is I've had to slacken all of the bolts off now, and I'm probably going to have to move the plate out the way. There isn't the clearance to remove the lower carb. I suppose you could put the oil tank off and go out this way, but I'm just going to hold these and just pop it out the way. And there we are, with some manipulation the bottom carb is out, and so I just push this plate to the side, and there's that fuel line. I just disconnected it a bit further up, but that's it off. We'll re-secure the rest of these and put the lid back on, because it'll be a few days before we're back with the repaired carb. And there we are, I'll just put the airbox back on, so we'll put the lid back on now, and we'll get to inspecting the carb for why it's blocked and not running. And there it is, removed. So we've got the carb back now. We'll just go a quick overview of what we've got. So this is the side that mounts to the engine. There's a small gasket there that mounts to the intake manifold, and inside there's the throttle plate, which is moved by the rod that goes through on here. On the other side we've got the choke, and that's used to aid on a cold day for a start. You wouldn't use this during normal operations. I don't know how easy it is to see, but the face here isn't the same diameter all the way through. It narrows near the middle, and as it narrows, as the air's getting pulled in, because obviously the engine's a bit like an air pump, the piston travels down, it sucks air through here, and as it sucks in, the flow is narrowed, and as it narrows, the air accelerates, and the quicker something moves, so the quicker the air moves, the lower its pressure becomes. And right on here, on the step, which is the venturi, you have the jet or the emulsion tube, which is in the float chamber itself. And that low pressure draws the fuel up and is metered in by the throttle plate. And that's what gives you your air-fuel mixture in effect. But the problem we have is that when the engine's run, this is a three-bank carburetor, so it's each carb to a cylinder. There's 3 cylinders, so 3 carbs. This one's not working. Now the engine's running, the ignition, we've tested the ignition, we've tested compression, everything's running. We spray carb cleaner through here and you get a reaction from the engine. So the problem lies with the carb itself. We'll pull it apart, we'll have a look, clean it out. We've got some new gaskets to go back on. This top plate, which is like the idle circuit, we'll take this off as well. We've got a new gasket for that. We'll clean the entire thing up. Hopefully won't need ultrasonic cleaning. So the first thing, 4 screws underneath. 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is the float chamber. So inside of here is the float. Those 4 screws hold it on. So we're going to take this off, each one, and see what's happening inside. There we go. Got a little tub here so we can catch whatever comes out. Bone dry. 4 screws. Not that much residue in the bottom there. So looking into the body itself, it is quite dirty. So we'll strip it down, we'll see what else we find. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the float. Now it's held on, there's a little screw here which holds this pin in its recess. So we're going to undo this screw. There it is, there's the float out. We can see a bit further in. Again, looks quite clean. Is the needle itself is stuck. Quite solid in fact. So we'll give it a little bit of spray of PB Blaster just to loosen it off. And we'll let that soak for a little bit and we'll come back to it. Now while that's soaking, the purpose of that needle is that it's attached to this float and it maintains fuel level within the engine. So right now it's upside down, but if you imagine the engine's needing fuel at the moment it's empty, the float would be in theory up, because imagine this is upside down. As fuel comes in, this float starts to rise to its correct level. Now that needle sits in a little seat and that maintains the correct flow. So as the engine starts running, it'll use the fuel level will drop and the float will drop as well. The fuel pump's always pumping fuel in. What we don't want is to pump the body so full of fuel that it starts pumping it out of the jet and into the downstream, into the engine, overfueling the engine. So that little needle there just sits on a little rubber seat. It's got a rubber tipped sort of needle end, sits in a rubber seat, and as it gets to the right amount, it just nips it shut, and that's it. And then as the engine uses the fuel level drops, the fuel pump's pumping away still, the fuel level rises. It's always moving all the time, maintaining correct flow, correct level. But I think what's happened is, for whatever reason, this has got stuck and it's dried out. So we'll let that soak for a little bit longer. We'll see if we can free it without damaging it. Okay, so it's been soaking for a bit, and we'll apply some air pressure now to try and pop it out. There we go. And that's it out. It's not in good condition at all. Don't think that's going to be salvageable. We'll to use a torch to see into the recess there where it sits and see the condition of the seat. Okay, so I've had it soaking for a bit. We're going to remove the main jet. So we'll just get a flat blade in there. Start removing that. There's the main jet. You can actually see through that. It's not blocked at all. There's a little bit of dirt on the backside, but it's hardly noticeable. I'm starting to think the main reason that this carb wasn't working is because that needle. I mean, it's damaged on the back there. Well, for a start, it was stuck. So that was obviously the reason why there was no fuel coming in. But even the end there, it's starting to come away. So I believe we'll have to get that replaced. That can't go back in because there's a little collar that goes around the back. There's a little like spring clip that goes on there. I mean, part of it's missing, so I mean that might pop off at some point. So we'll have to get that cleaned. Sorry, not cleaned, replaced. So now we've got the jet out. We can drop down the emulsion tube. Easier said than done normally. There we go. This is what I like to call it, the emulsion tube. Let's see here, get a bit of light on it. Yeah, there's a bit of dirt on there. So we'll have to use the brass rod and just rod them through with a bit of brass, a bit of carb cleaner. Go for one of the finest ones I've got. And then we'll just start at the top. Rod straight through, that goes through both sides. We'll work our way down. We should be able to see through that now. Yep. Looking quite clean. Give the jet a bit of a clean as well. Step that to one side. So now we'll do the idle circuit. It's under this little bung. Put that to one side, and we'll start to take this out with the flathead. Now you have to be really careful when you're taking these out because they are brass, and if there's slightest bit of resistance, you can just take the tops off. So there's plenty of lubrication. Soak them overnight if you want, and don't force it. And I should, depending on how many threads there are on there, it's ready to come out now, cleaned as well. There we go, there's that one now, just dropped out. This is the idle. That one's looking pretty clean as well, but we'll give it another clean. I can actually see through the orifice on this one's even smaller than the main jet. And we'll just give this a clean as well. Carb clean it, and then we'll just go with the airline, blast it off. There we go. I'm doing now, I'll just do a generous bit of carb cleaner. Surface overview. And then we'll hit it with the airline. Just to blast it all off. Getting all these orifices, all these holes. Not going too mad with the cleaning because I'm quite happy with the actual condition. I mean, that is very clean. Just a bit of carb cleaner, just to wipe off and blast with air through, making sure you get every passageway. The jet, the emulsion tube, very clean as well. Like I said, the main thing I think was wrong with this one was the needle getting stuck in there, or if not stuck and completely blocking the fuel off, restricting it to a point where the engine just wasn't running, couldn't receive the right amount of fuel. Now we'll do the top, which is sort of the idle circuit. So again, we've got 3 little screws on top here. We'll slacken these off. There we go, that's it off. And you can see inside there, very clean. The top cover there, very clean as well. You can't see there on the top, got the mixture screw. Just protruding through there is the end of the needle. Yeah, it's very clean. Not a scratch of dirt on there. We'll still go over carb cleaner, bit of air on it, just to make sure. Quickly just finish that off. I have given it a good spray there. It's just the final spray. Now we'll hit it with the compressed air, clean out all the passageways. I'll do that off camera just because I need to charge the reservoir back up. And that's it. That's the carb pretty much disassembled. We're not going to take the rods, choke, throttle off, anything like that. I don't think it needs to. Next, we'll just take the gaskets off. Got gasket there, gasket on the top plate, and there's a one that sits in the float bowl as well. We'll take those 3 off and replace them for new. So here's the first gasket. It's just a simple case of just, before you take it off, just make sure it's the right one. That sits on there, lovely. Mirror image. We'll just pick this one out, stick the new one on. So just using a flat blade screwdriver, just dig it in there, and we'll just peel it off. With the new one, we'll just lay it over and align all the marks. Just like that. Now that's ready to go back on the top of the carb. Lay it down, 3 screws, tighten them up. So there's that one done. I've just done it off camera there. Top plate's back on. Now for the lower section, we'll put the jet emulsion tube back in. Do the main one first. Just drop straight down. Just give it a little tap to see it. You should be able to see it on the bridge there. Hopefully the Venturi. Now we can put the main jet in. Get a slotted driver, make sure it's wide enough to cover both slots, and just screw it down till it seats. Doesn't have to be over tight or you'll damage it. There we go. Now the off idle. Drop that one in. A smaller flat. Screw that one down. And this one's covered with a plug that just sits over the top. Do the float bowl body now. Same thing. Just pick the old one out. And the same as with the gasket. Once the old one's off and clean, just remove it and we'll lay it over the top. And that'll seal lovely on the bottom of the carb. So that's pretty much it for the cleaning and disassembly, rebuild. Like I say, we'll have to order a new needle, because that's pretty confident that's what the cause of the problem was. So after a few days, we've got the new needle assembly on the left and the old one on the right. As you can see, vastly improved condition compared to the old one. Installation, straightforward. We take the new part, seating O-ring, place it in, take it up on the threads, wind it all the way in, and just finish that off. 10mm socket, just to nip it up. There we go. Now for the needle, we put the boot on it, which just pushes into the back. And then there's a little retaining collar that just snaps round the shoulder. That will connect to the float tab. With the seat installed, it's now a simple task of just reattaching the needle itself to the float with a little spring clip that's attached onto the tab. Now we'll fit it and set the float height. According to the manual, 15mm plus or minus 1mm. If it's above or below that, we bend the tab, which is this tab here. And we'll check it on the digital calipers using the depth. So we'll install this when you put the float pin back in. Set it into there. The one screw that holds it in, we'll tighten that up. And now we'll check the height. It's slightly out of spec, need to come up a little bit. So we'll do that. We'll just remove it all again, we'll bend the tab up. And that's it set now, the float height. Set it against the caliper there. Set perfect to the top of the float, against the body. And now we can just fit the float chamber back on. 4 screws. And that'll be sealed back up. Now we'll install the float chamber back onto the body. 4 screws. 1, 2, 3, 4. And a quick check if you can hear it. You can hear the float moving, so it's not bound up or jammed. One of the last pieces we have is the bowl drain. Take this off, 10mm socket. There's the old O-ring on there. Got a new one down here. Take that off, fit a new one. And that's just so at the end you can drain your float bowls out end of season without having to remove the carburetor. Just a quick way of getting to the fuel. So we're back at the Yamaha 40 this morning. Got the carb ready to go. We'll go through the installation and then we'll give it a test run, and hopefully that's it firing on all 3 cylinders now instead of 2. So as with the disassembly, we'll take the cover off the airbox and then we'll go ahead and refit the carb. So there we go, airbox is off, the 2 bolts down there. We'll withdraw them, the next 2, and slacken the top 2, and we'll push the carb in and we'll re-secure it. As you can see, that's the lower carb now fitted. 2 bolts on the bottom. Just got to do these linkages now. The throttle, the choke. Got a fuel line on that side as well to fit. We should be good for a test run.